Welcome back to Write with Impact. I am thrilled to have Robbie Abed and Troy Sandidge today. Robbie, I've known you for a very long time from LinkedIn. I don't know, 7, 8 years. I forgot already. I lost track. Robbie is an executive ghostwriter, marketer, and author of the best-selling book, Fire Me, I Beg You. He's a columnist at Inc.com, and he's the founder and CEO of No Middle, which is a content branding and content marketing firm, advisory firm, and he's going to tell us all about that in a moment. Troy is Chief Operating Officer and Creative Director of No Middle, working with Robbie. He is also the author of a best-selling book called Strategize Up, and he's the host and executive producer of I Digress podcast. And I do like to digress a lot, so I love that title.
Thank you.
Why don't we just start off first, Robbie, tell us a little bit about yourself, and your firm, what you do exactly for clients. And then Troy, I'd love for you to do the same. And then we're going to get into what I'd like to cover today in today's episode is how to build a content marketing engine.
Thanks, Glenn. I mean, for me, I came from Accenture and Deloitte. I used to deliver large scale IT solutions for clients. I used to travel all over the world. It was a great job. I was director of IT for a company. Worst job of my life. I'll never manage IT ever again. And then now all I do, yada, yada, yada. Now all I do is write and market for tech companies. And so a big reason why I created No Middle was that there was a huge problem where tech firms, especially tech consultancies, could not create good content. And that was problem number one. And the second problem they had was they couldn't do it at scale. And so I created No Middle to solve that problem. And it's called No Middle because we generally do not want to work with people that want to be in the middle. And so the people, our clients, are generally the high growth companies. They want to make an impact. They want to move fast. And that's love. That's music to our ears. So we do a lot of branding, marketing. We'll talk about the content engine, but content and positioning is really where our bread and butter is.
Yeah, so my background, I'm big into B2B. I'm a 3-time agency builder. I've risen up the ranks. I've held every probably job you can think of in marketing, rising up the ranks. I've done it all, been through it all. And yeah, I kind of got tired of it too, just kind of like Robbie. So kind of thing he asked me to bring on, and I'm a big strategy and systems person. So I live in complexity and I love to make things simple. And so we've been able to really iron out and carve a really big solution to a humongous problem that a lot of brands, a lot of B2B and tech firms are having. They create content, but they don't know how to bring it to market. They don't know how to drive it to scale. And they don't know how to do that at a sustainable rate that saves them time, but maximize their ROI. And we have built a system that allows them to do that.
Anyway, so let's talk about content marketing or content creation. Everyone's doing it, right? And there are reasons for that. Maybe just tell us, why do your clients, why do companies, say business leaders, and in your case, entrepreneurs, mostly technology entrepreneurs, technology business leaders, why do they want to create content? I mean, why shouldn't they just focus on making great products, right? That have that product market fit or whatever that term is, and, leave it up to the marketing department or their content marketing department to handle this. What is it that they see in creating and distributing, publishing content and in different formats? Let's talk about different formats, and then tell us what you see them doing wrong. Let's be totally blunt, and then how do you help them? And give us some of your 4 or 5 best tips so we don't have to hire you.
Good. And I guess I'll tackle the first few questions. I mean, number one, the biggest problem these executives have is they have a lot of things to say. They just don't have enough time to write it. And so what we solve for them is time. And so the question is, why do they want to write? Well, a lot of the companies that we have from a sales and marketing perspective, either some of them are like the rainmakers of the companies, meaning like they're responsible for sales. And some of these are very large companies too as well, where the founder is the leader of the company. And they just want to get out their voice. And so, but they have a lot of things to say. They just either they hate writing or they just don't have enough time for it. And so So they all already believe in the value of writing and content marketing. We never have to convince someone to write, or for us to write for them. If we did, it would never work, So one of our rules really is our clients have to want it more than we do, So if they want it, then we can make things happen. If they don't, then we can't. And so from a content, I'll talk about from the executive point of view, and Troy can really talk about how the engine works and how he's mastered that. They every tech company, every tech firm, they have marketing teams and things like that, but the marketing leader is generally on an island. Okay, this is the same for almost every single company I've worked for. The marketing team is on an island. You have the team that does the work or creates the product. You have the marketing team who sort of understands it. They have a good understanding, but they can't capture that voice from the CEO, the founder, from the head of sales, or anyone else. So they struggle with that. Even if they do the interviews and things like that, the resulting piece, the content comes back like it's just bad. Like nobody wants to read it. So gone are the days of like blog posts, and things like that, because nobody really reads blog posts. Nobody goes to your website and says, hey, what is what's their latest thoughts? Because for being honest, most of them are pretty boring and average tactics. And so the problem that we solve is helping these companies create really, really great, engaging content. We use LinkedIn as our platform, mainly because that's where their customers are, that's where the audience are, that's where the engagement is. And we focus heavily on that, and it works phenomenally well. And so what's in it for the people that we write for is they get engagement, they get the likes, they get the activities, and these in terms of like vanity metrics and things like that, there's a ton of that out there, especially on LinkedIn. You could just measure everything, but the reality is this actually generating conversations? So the main reason why if company leader writes is they want to generate conversations, they want to generate business, and so the work that we do for them is to get their thoughts out in their voice with as little edits as possible, and that's sort of like our bread and butter. It took us a long time to get there, but that's sort of the platform that we built to that. But I'll let Troy talk about, you had a loaded question there, so I'll let Troy pick his questions of choice and go for it.
Yeah, I like to counter a question with a question that's just hypothetical for the listeners. Which is more important, content quality, content quantity, content creation, or content distribution? Well, I like to always say, most people who vote or pick something, they're wrong, but they'll still be right. And what do I mean by that? I mean, like at the end of the day, quality is not determined by how long it took you to write it, how much money you spent on it. It's in the eye of the consumers, in the eye of the audience. And then also quality is determined by, what was the ROI? How long did it take? That time spent creating that could have been spent doing something else. And that's the hamster wheel people find themselves on. Content creation doesn't mean you're doing content marketing effectively. If I write a white paper today and I don't distribute it enough times and puts the content in certain realms for people to see it, identify that they need it, or just qualify that they don't need it, click on it, download it, it convinces them on what they need to do, and then they convert and do what they need to do, then that content, no matter how much website traffic you got, it's not the quality. But we're so focused on making content quality determined by the effort, to make it so, versus the distribution, and let the consumer be the judge for themselves. We as No Middle, we're building the system. One of them is called LinkedIn Authority Writing System of itself, is really taking content from their own words, whether they do an interview, whether it's civic content, which, there's this whole thing about AI right now, and you see the duplication, but you can screenshot word for word people just saying the same thing, and they think us as audiences and consumers don't see that. And so what we do to eliminate a lot of the BS, a lot of the fluff and things like that, is that, hey, let's get it from you directly from the source. Can you give us 30 minutes of your time? Now, who wouldn't exchange 30 minutes for 3 months worth of high quality content that is designed and intentful, placed to help them convert? And what I like to always say, increase their gap, their growth, authority, and profitability. At the core of it all, content is what convinces people to buy. It what convinces people to stay in communities and all these things. But they don't have the time, or they don't have the skill, or they don't have the knowledge to do these things. So they pay us to make the system their own custom content engine for them to do all of that at scale. That's sustainable, that's good flow. And imagine all of that's in queue. And now you can spend your time elsewhere, knowing that the system works for itself to help you always have a constant voice that we know is credible because you're on top of mind of your ideal audience daily, weekly, monthly, even yearly, just by making that investment. The ROI is what do you make of it? But to bring it back on home, that's where the whole point of it is to really simplify to make that engine possible. And too many folk are stuck with the pieces, but they don't have a completed puzzle piece. The puzzle isn't completed yet because they haven't built the engine to really distribute the content to determine if it's quality or not. And we're always optimizing, improving on the voice, on the tone, on the intentions, on the distribution, on the platforms that we distribute on with our clients. And so it's always going to evolve and grow and be better.
Right. And you mentioned the LinkedIn Authority writing system. Tell us about that. That sounds very interesting because, as you know, I use LinkedIn quite a bit. That's my main platform in addition to my Substack. And I know a lot of the listeners and viewers of this program will be on LinkedIn. And they're, the perpetual question is, how do I break through? How do I get the attract the algorithm to pick up my content and share it? Or is it about that? Or is it about, what is it? How do people break through, and why are they not breaking through? So what is it about this? Tell us about this LinkedIn Authority writing system.
Sure. It's a proprietary system, that's built to bridge that gap between content creation and content distribution, specifically for LinkedIn. And use today, people, you want to go where the money is, but yet they're not posting enough consistently, consecutively on the very platform that decision makers are that they need to do what they need to do and make those, those buys. And so, like Robbie always used to say, we're saving people time. And so the system is designed to save them time, interviewing them directly and outputting by a content multiplier. So it's not just one form. We're taking the source material and we're multiplying it in various fashions and forms on LinkedIn to help you get all the different things that you want, whether that's an increase in community, increase in authority, a boost in searchability. All those things matter in the decision maker's mind to see you as the top level business executive you are, which make it much easier to have conversations, to have dialogue, and conversions. But it starts with the system and building that for each of our clientele.
Yeah, and to tack on what Troy said, I mean, there's a reason we call it, law, the LinkedIn Authority writing system, like, because it is the law. Like the system is the engine, right? And so a lot of times when, as a former marketing director for an agency and I've built writing content for a big part of my life, there's always different processes and things that every company, every client has different things. They do it different ways. They all sort of follow the same sort of procedure, but like it almost never works. Like it works for like a couple of weeks, a couple of months, and then like it breaks down. You know what I mean? Then like, oh, let's try to manage it on HubSpot and Trello and this, and they try all these different platforms and they keep going back and forth, and they can never really get rhythm with scaling and creating content. You know what I mean? There's always like new brainstorm meetings and this and that, and it changes this, and what articles we don't talk about. Like there's no real theme to what they do. So what we've done is create everything through campaigns, and that's how it goes through the system. That's really sort of Troy's genius, because he came up with like, I myself started with like single article here and this and that, but he's like, let's just call everything a campaign, and so we track everything through the system. And when we say system, it's a mixture of Trello boards, some automation, reporting, analytics, data studio, and so like it's a full like 360 view of how much content we're creating. We can document our content velocity. We have automated reporting, literally with a click of a button. We'll tell you what campaigns we're working on, what campaigns are coming up. And so it's like all the things involved, the content creation, including the reporting, is what we've massed. That's what we call it law. So like every piece of content goes through this system, which Troy runs. And that's how it works. And so we spent a long, Troy can sort of verify, we took a long time to fine tweak this and to do it in a way where we could scale the number of writers behind the scenes without anyone knowing or impacting the quality of content, and so it's like, so instead of hiring like when you look for a writer, you interview them, etc. And now it's kind of like, okay, well, the process that we have is we still look for really good writers, and we interview a lot of writers, and we select very few of them. But as a consumer of the content, you really don't. It's still in that person's voice. Whoever we're writing for, it's in their voice, and there are a lot of like rules that we set in place for that, and so that's why it works.
Right, and then so just walk us through. Just give us an example. You can sanitize it if you want. You don't have to name names, of course,
No,
of clients.
fine.
But walk us through the process. So let's say I keep hearing from both of you about talking to clients for, say, 30 minutes and turning that into a campaign, systematic campaign over a period of time. I've heard 3 months. What exactly happened? How, when you interviewed that client, what are you looking for, and what do you get out of that so that what they are saying is going to break through the noise? Right? It's going to be interesting and compelling. And how do you determine that? And then the second part of that is, how and where exactly are you, how are you reshaping or repurposing the content, and for which channels exactly? Obviously LinkedIn, but what type of media? Does this include infographics? Does it include PDFs? Does it include video, podcasts? How exactly does that all work? Give us some more insight. Open the door. Give us a peek into your studio.
What I'll do is I'll cover like the first half of it, then we'll cover each part of our domain that we've mastered. So the first part of it is, let's just say, for example, there's the CEO of the company. He wants to write more, talk more about his business or his thoughts and things like that. So the first thing we do is figure out how we can make it interesting. So that's a lot of upfront work with me and the founder of the company to understand the angles that they can take on. Like, what are the strong suits? What's different? What are they opinionated about the most? Opinions always work, and so we really focus on like, what are they opinionated the most? And the question I ask is, what do you, from a public perception of you, what do you want to be changed? Right. So like, that's a powerful question. It's like, how do people view you now, and how do you want people to view you? Right. Because that, how people perceive you is basically how that's how you're perceived, not how you think you're perceived. So as they say, PR doesn't stand for public relations. It stands for perception is reality. That's what PR stands for. So we operate on that perception is reality sort of mindset. I work with them, understand their strengths, and then I put together a brief, and then I'd say, this is the angles we want to take care of. I pass it over to Troy, and I record the interview. So I transcribe that, pass it over to Troy. So by the time he gets to Troy, he already knows the angle we're going for, the strengths, the bullet points, and a recorded transcription of the first interview. And then I pass it over to Troy, and that's where Troy sort of does his magic.
So once the preliminary interview, or even if Robbie conducts the full interview and gets to me and he gives me kind of the angles, I'll review it kind of creatively. What can we do? And some of that's based off what clients have arranged, what we know we can do, and I'll put in the freedom to do what we need to do. Is obviously subjective depending on client. So based on once I know all those things, I review it and quantify it and assign a creative brief, give specific details to our writers or designers or whatever's involved. And how do we make this into a multiplier? That's always my first question. How do I multiply this? And that's the biggest thing, because you say it enough times, so many different ways, and distribution is going to do you much more justice than just a few. And so we're always trying to stretch out and maximize content velocity while maintaining voice integrity. I think that's one of our biggest laws and biggest things about it. So once I design all that and we go through the writers, we have a really, really quick formal process that gets right into the system. We can track it every step of the way. Robbie likes to think of it like the Domino's pizza tracker. It can really go through pretty flow. And it's just like, okay, we're at this phase. And we fine tune it where we're checking. We know the tone, we know what we're looking for, but also we know the intent. We know the goal. We know what metrics we're trying to push against. I think sometimes when people design content of any type, they just design it from what they personally want versus like what I need this to become in order to get the results that we want. So that's a phenomenal job when Robbie does up front. We know what the lay of the land, we know the results, we know the audience. We have to now create the content to match that authority to get those actions to happen. And so at the back end, once it's in its like final phase, we do the proofreading, we modify it, Robbie reviews it another strong time, and then we review it to the clients for review. If they have any questions, we've been more than happy to fill it out with them. And they're feeling pretty confident that they're like, hey, look how much content I have now to go ammunition on LinkedIn, on other channels, whether that's a carousel, whether that's long form, short form, and different things of that nature to really maximize the output of their different clientele, the different executive leadership, and their business page as well.
You mentioned different types of content on LinkedIn. Let's get a little bit, granular on this, as they say. I hope I don't have to pay you $5 for that buzzword that I just used. I understand
Not on the list yet,
on your website, I'm assuming it's somewhat in a joking manner, or maybe you're actually quite serious, that there's certain terms, certain industry buzzwords that you really detest, and you will charge a client $5 for the use of, say, thought leadership. Is that right?
And digital transformation. It's words that these tech firms have used that don't mean anything. They don't mean anything to them. They don't mean anything to the customer. They just don't mean anything. It's a catch-all term. And so any of these terms that we find people using, the question is like, what does that mean? And that's where you'd ask, to take a step further into that. And so we don't give people an easy way out to create content, because it's not going to be good if you use those terms anyway.
And how do you convert that, or how do you translate those buzzwords or jargon into clear, more compelling, more interesting, more clickable, more relatable terms?
I mean, the one thing we do, and it's a hard rule for our writers, is to not make up stuff, right? Like, that's probably why I do the interview, and that's where content goes wrong, is when the writer has to like fill in the blanks per se, and that's when it starts getting, especially in a subject that they're not really familiar with. And so we keep it interesting by literally just sticking to what they say, but formatted differently and written down, and so that's worked out really well, because we've written about a lot of very, very sensitive subjects online, but we just use the words of the person doing it, and it's worked out. So some situation, I'm like, are you sure you want to say this? Like, yeah. I'm okay, well, here's what it says. Like, okay, post, so that's just our, to keep it interesting. And that's why we do a lot of the pre-interviews, is we find the interesting thing before Troy interviews them, so like, that's how we find it interesting, versus going on the call and then trying to understand what the interesting thing is. So before we go on the call, we already know the angle that we're going to take.
How does that work? How do you do what you said, pre-interview? How do you discover what's interesting before you talk to them? Explain what you mean by that.
Well, I guess in our process where I interview them up front and I talk to them, that's more of an open discussion on like, what they want to talk about, what's interesting. I'll give them my input on what I think is interesting versus
it sounds like more like strategy planning.
Yeah, strategy planning, and more just it's hammering in on like the position, like what is the one thing that they want to take on, and how do we like capitalize that, versus like, here's 15 tips. Like, I'm very big on like, here's the one thing that I truly believe in, what I'm really passionate about, what I really want to talk about. Let's talk about that, and let's forget about everything else that everyone else can say. People could say, oh, digital transformation is changing the way we work. Like, well, duh, like, of course. And nobody's going to go on the podcast going, whoa, my God, this person has this crazy thought about digital transformation. In reality, it's the same thought. It's been written around for the past 10, 15 years. And so a lot of what keeps things interesting is us avoiding topics that are just not interesting,
Right.
And that's the best. And listen, some people are more interesting than others, organically, naturally, anyway. And so we obviously like those people too.
And what would be an example of, digital transformation, but in a very interesting, an interesting angle, interesting, innovative or unique take on that topic? Because it is an overly used term, and yet it is still, to be realistic, it's relevant. It's just how do you help a client, a tech entrepreneur, make it interesting?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, one is, I'm not saying we like avoid the topic. We don't use the word digital transformation. I usually go back to like, give me like an example of something that's worked. We talk about like impact of something, for a client, for example. It's like, give me like a specific example of like why that worked, and and give me like your real opinion on it. So it's like we're sitting at like a fireplace type of thing, and it's just like what do you really like? What do you even think about the term digital transformation? You know, like there's one client we have like a series for them where it's called Hypernaut, and we talk about, you know, even the term digital transformation, the term metaverse, the term AI, like what do they really think about it? And so we get around it by asking them the real opinion on the cliche topic, and that's when we get their voice out. And so we try to not make it like just business professional. You know, it's like you are a representative of the company, you are an individual. Like, let's not think about this as some sort of B2B podcast or whatever it is. It's like, just tell me how you really feel. You know, so that's what Troy is really good at, is like getting that emotion out of people. You know, like tell me how you really feel, and then they get on it.
Sounds a bit like psychotherapy. But tell us, Troy, I mean, how, you know, let's say I'm a client and I need your help. You know, I don't have a profile on LinkedIn, and I barely look at my LinkedIn, you know, once a month, if that, you know, where do I start? So Troy, once you've interviewed me for 30 minutes, you know, when can I see my first blog post on LinkedIn? What would you tell me, you know, how do I actually literally get started? What's the first piece of content I need to publish on LinkedIn? How long is it? What does it look like? Do I use emojis? Do I use hashtags? What is a hashtag? Help me out here.
So before I get into that, I'll add on to what Robbie said about the process.
Sure.
And think of it like you know, executive producer and an anchor, you know, who's going on for the interview. So really, Robbie serves as that EP to get the right angles and filter, and also gives me time to understand the subject, understand the person or the group of people who I'm interviewing, the type of content, and how to look at them, and also understand where their strengths, where their weaknesses. So that way I can lean toward their strengths. They may not even be aware I'm asking questions in a certain way to get a certain result. A little bit of psychology, a little bit of sociology, and just, you know, behavioral science of understanding people. And so that pre-interview is phenomenal and critical, and to make sure I have enough time to process and prep based off how they respond, their body language, do they bring more energy, not much energy, because they have everything in their heads. They struggle with getting it out, especially tech companies. They have a hard time getting out. And the core thing about all of this is, you know, when we talk about, you know, a transformation, they hide behind these words, innovation, transformation. And it's like, no, tell me a story. The best people who have the best content are storytellers. And we're making individuals into storytellers and media companies by pulling out content the right way. Now, pause, going to your answering your question now, setting the stage for that, is as we're going through the interview and we're seeing what their goals are, we know what type of content's going to work. If they're trying to really get more awareness and they want a wide net they're trying to attract, well, we need to be bold. We need to be loud. We need to be more visual. So that may be carousels. That may be hot takes first lines to get people to engage, and then click see more to read the rest, because we know that's a formula for loud and awareness. Maybe they've already been pretty established, but they're not getting conversions. They're not getting conversations, where now we may lean in on more polls and asking more questions to drive more community. We may be tagging and referencing other people from different accounts that they look up to, that they learn from, quotables, to attract folk to engage in those conversations. And once they know that profile, that person is a bridge for maybe their overstanding topic of technology, of innovation, and other things like that, now the conversation can happen and the conversions can happen. But that's all from knowing what the content. And lastly, that may be blog posts, that may be, you know, white papers and things like that as well. It's based on exactly what they need, what their strengths are, and where are they at in their content process. We meet them where they are and we help them get to where we want to be. But it's way more complicated than that. But we spend a lot of time living in the complexity to make things as simple as possible. So they just get it. We output it. Here's what we've provided for you based off what you know that you need in 2 to 3 weeks. Go knock it out of the park and go get your money.
You mentioned a couple of formats like carousels. What is a carousel? You mentioned hot takes. There are just a couple terms that I'm not familiar with, or maybe some of my viewers are not familiar with.
So a hot take would simply be, have you ever had something very provocative? I quit my job today. And you see like spaces that see more. They click see more. They didn't quit their job at all. They just like had a hot take, or maybe they did, but they want to get you that shock value. And so a hot take is those first 1 to 3 lines that really pulls in someone. You're scrolling. You're competing against so many other people, so much other content. So that shock value is going to get someone to stop. That's different. See more. I got you now on the hook. Let's read the rest. That's kind of the formula for it. So for a carousel, to switch gears, a carousel is typically if you've been on Instagram and you see multiple images, it's just a swipe feature. You see a whole thing. Now, a carousel itself is not just one image, it's a collective whole that could be 3, could be 5, could be 25 images. But now the images for LinkedIn have to be in a PDF version. Rumor has it they're making modifications to the app, but as for right now, this current moment, it has to be a PDF for it to have that swipe feature where you can really see the whole experience. And so we found that that works really well for educating individuals, taking a dense topic and breaking up for people to understand it. A lot of things can be very, we have a client that maybe is very tax heavy. So maybe a carousel is a good way to kind of block it out for them to process and understand it and go on to the next thing in bite-sized chunks. But also it's sometimes you were saying all the right things, but just making it a little bit more visual just helps people understand. When you're dealing with Gen Pop and things like that, now I understand what you do. And what's the hardest thing a lot of tech startup firms have? No one knows what the heck you do. They don't understand it. So a carousel could be a really easy way to just light bulb. I get it, because you've added visual elements to add to the complexity so people can understand it at scale. So those are 2 examples for that.
That's excellent. That's very, very clear. And podcasts?
I can add on to that. So there's a reason
Trevor,
why
yeah.
we've leaned in on audiograms is that we find is that a lot of folk freak out when they're on video. They are not themselves. And I get it, but there's never been a person to this day I haven't been able to interview and create good content out of, because you got to have someone you can trust to really walk you through it. Now, in many cases, but they're saying good things, but their body language may not be right. They may not be applicable for people to consumption and not very entertaining. And so in audiograms, what we lean on, that kind of solves that problem. We're taking the same audio, but we're adding visual elements just enough to count as a video, get all the benefits of a video without all the stuff you got to go through it. Constant phases, constant lighting adjustments, snipping in audio. You clean the audio once, you add the visuals on top for the audiogram, you're done. It still counts as a video. It's still as effective. People still watch, they still consume. And you can do it much quicker. And that's the other part of it is we want to deal with ease, but we also want to deal with speed. And so those are really our biggest things in making this system work phenomenally, is that speed component. And audiograms eliminates a lot of that stuff because we don't have to worry about that. Good audio, find the right spots, or we merge it together. There's a series of audiograms and it's done really well for a lot of our clients. And so obviously not every case is an audiogram. I was dealing with, in many cases, you can get by with text. And in most cases, text still wins the day. Text is still going to be the very thing to compel someone to click on your profile, to go to your website, to fill out a form, to join a Zoom call and say yes. Now, the other elements helps build awareness, shows your creativity and depth, and maybe help people at the top of the funnel. It probably won't be the very thing to close it, but the more people see your authority and see you're out there with other visual elements, the more they assume you have some type of dominance and authority at play with it.
That's fantastic. Both of you, thank you so much. What's the best way to reach you?
For me, it's Robbie at nomiddle.com. So it's ROBBIE at nomiddle.com.
Yeah, our website's nomiddle.com. If you want to learn more about me, find Shore everywhere on the internet.
That's great. No, thanks a lot for sharing. This is fascinating. Look into how you guys operate. I know you're doing really, really well. So congratulations on your success. And yeah, maybe we'll do it again some other time on another topic, but keep creating great content. And thanks again for joining Right with Impact.
Thank you.
Thank you.